The wind had been whispering all day, a low, constant hum that seemed almost like words if you listened closely. Mara didn't know why she had insisted on coming to the old cabin in the woods. Her friends had warned her. It was abandoned, they said, haunted by the echoes of the past. But she needed solitude. She needed a break from the city, from the constant hum of life and responsibilities, from the memory of her sister's face. The cabin looked worse than she expected. Its wooden boards were warped, nails sticking out like tiny rusted teeth, windows coated in grime. A faint smell of rot hung in the air, and the trees around it seemed unnaturally still. Mara told herself it was just autumn, the quiet before the snow. But as she crossed the threshold, a chill ran down her spine. The door creaked behind her like a warning. Inside, dust hung thick in the air, making it taste like old paper. She turned on her flashlight, the beam trembling as it revealed the room. A fireplace filled with cold ashes, a table overturned, a chair lying on its side. The walls were scratched with long, jagged lines, almost like someone had tried to climb out or in. Mara shook her head. Old houses always looked more sinister in shadows. She set her bag down and tried to focus on her plan. Unpack, make some tea, read a book, forget the world for a few hours. But when she reached for her backpack, she noticed something odd on the floor, a thin, black ribbon, frayed at the edges. She didn't recognize it, but it had a faint metallic smell. Curious, she picked it up. It was heavier than it looked, and as soon as her fingers touched it, she felt a prickling at the back of her neck, like someone was watching. "I'm just imagining things," she muttered. But the feeling didn't go away. She moved deeper into the cabin, flashlight slicing through darkness, and the air grew colder. The walls seemed closer now, like the cabin itself was breathing, inhaling her. She tried to ignore it, telling herself that old houses settle at night, that the wind through the cracks made it feel alive. But then she saw it. A shadow darted across the far wall, too quick to be human. Mara froze. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she called out, "Hello?" Nothing. She moved forward cautiously, gripping the flashlight like a weapon. Every creak of the floor made her flinch. The shadow appeared again, this time in the corner of the room. It didn't have a shape, just a darkness darker than darkness, like a hole in the world. She blinked, and it was gone. Mara told herself to leave, now. She didn't care about solitude anymore. But when she reached the door, it wouldn't budge. She pushed harder, her palms slipping on the old wood, but the door stayed firm, as if the cabin itself refused to let her go. The shadows moved again, whispering. At first, she thought it was the wind, but then she realized the whispers had words, sharp and twisting, curling around her mind. Stay, stay, stay. Panic surged. She ran to the window, yanking at the latch. It was nailed shut. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, like 100 voices breathing right in her ear. Her flashlight flickered, and when the light returned, she saw them. Figures pressed against the inside of the glass. They had no faces, just black hollows where eyes should be. They didn't move like humans. They glided, sliding against the walls and ceiling, their limbs bending impossibly. Mara stumbled back, heart screaming, and tripped over something soft. She looked down, a pile of black ribbons, like the one she had found. They writhed and twisted, as if alive. She tried to run again, but the ribbons wrapped around her ankles, pulling her down. She screamed, kicking and clawing, but they were relentless. From the corner of the room, the faceless figures emerged, reaching for her with long, spindly arms. They whispered her name in voices she recognized. Her sister's voice, her mother's, her own, twisted and wrong. Mara, stay. Her scream echoed through the cabin, swallowed by the shadows. She fought, but the ribbons tightened, pulling her to the floor. The figures leaned closer, their hollow eyes boring into her skull. She could feel them inside her head now, whispering, clawing, rewriting her thoughts. Then she remembered the ribbon in her hand. Desperation gave her strength. With a surge of energy, she grabbed it and yanked. The ribbons around her shrieked, recoiling like sneaks burned by fire. The faceless figures recoiled too, hissing and twisting, leaving black stains on the walls as they retreated into the corners. Mara didn't wait. She ran to the back door and kicked it open. The night air hit her like a wall of ice. The trees seemed less oppressive here, less alive. She didn't look back, running through the forest with the sound of whispers fading behind her. When she finally reached her car, parked miles away, she fumbled with the keys. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely insert them. She glanced back once at the edge of the woods. The cabin was gone. No trace of it remained, as if it had never existed. Mara drove without stopping until the city lights rose on the horizon. Her phone was dead, no signal, no messages, no memory of exactly how long she'd been gone. She tried to tell herself it was a dream, a hallucination brought on by isolation. But then she felt it, a faint weight in her pocket. The black ribbon. And when she pulled it out, she saw a word embroidered on it in tiny, perfect letters. Stay. It began with the tapping. At first, Jonah thought it was just the old pipes in the basement. The house had been empty for decades before he moved in, and the city had warned him it might be unstable. But the sound didn't follow any rhythm of plumbing. It was irregular, deliberate, like fingers drumming against wood. The first night he ignored it. He told himself it was nothing. But by the second night, the tapping had grown louder, closer. He could hear it right beneath his bedroom floor, and sometimes it came from above, like it had no fixed location at all. Jonah tried to leave. He packed a bag and drove to a motel. But when he returned the next day, drawn by some stubborn curiosity, the tapping had followed him. In his car, it had been faint at first, like a ghost brushing against the windows. When he got home, it was loud again, waiting for him. By the third night, Jonah stopped sleeping. He would sit upright in bed, listening, trying to locate the sound. It moved beneath the floorboards, around the walls, behind doors. Sometimes he swore he heard it scratching at the ceiling. He checked every inch of the house, basement, attic, crawl spaces. Nothing. Only the faint echoes of tapping, always just out of reach. Then he saw it. At the far end of the hallway, a figure emerged from the shadows. At first, he thought it was a reflection, some trick of the streetlight spilling through the blinds. But the figure moved independently, gliding across the floor without making a sound. It was tall, impossibly thin, limbs bent at strange angles. Its face was featureless, a smooth expanse of gray that seemed to absorb the light around it. Jonah froze. The figure raised one arm slowly, pointing toward him or maybe toward the bedroom door. And then it tapped, one finger against the wall, a single sharp tap. The sound made Jonah's blood run cold. He blinked, and the figure was gone, but the tapping continued. Every night after that, it came in sequences. 2 taps, 3, 7, sometimes faster, sometimes slower. He tried to record it, but when he played it back, there was nothing, just silence. He tried to leave again. He packed, drove out of town, checked into another motel. For a few nights, the tapping stopped. Relief washed over him. But on the 4th night, in the darkness of a cheap hotel room, he heard it again, soft at first, like a gentle knock, then growing louder, echoing from every wall, floor, and ceiling at once. He ran to the window. Below, the streets were empty, silent. No one was there, but the tapping followed him wherever he went. It wasn't outside, it was inside, in his head. He stopped talking to people. He stopped leaving the house entirely. He couldn't sleep, he couldn't eat. Every time he closed his eyes, the tapping was there, counting, marking time, promising something he couldn't maim. One night, in desperation, he went down to the basement. The tapping had been loudest there for weeks, almost like it was calling him. He flipped the light switch. The bulb flickered, then went out. Jonah descended into darkness, flashlight in hand. The air was damp, musty, smelling of decay. The basement walls were lined with shelves covered in dust and cobwebs, but in the center, there was a hole, a perfect square hole in the floor, and the tapping came from it. Jonah's flashlight illuminated the edges, scratches, deep gouges, as if someone had tried to dig their way up from beneath the house. He leaned closer. The tapping stopped. Silence. Then, from the hole, a voice whispered his name. Jonah. He stumbled back, tripping over a box. The flashlight skittered across the floor, beams spinning, and for a brief moment he saw them. Hundreds of eyes, glowing faintly in the darkness of the hole. They were small, round, and unblinking, staring at him with
The old train station had been closed for decades. Rusted tracks led nowhere, platforms crumbling under weeds and decay. People said it was haunted, that anyone who entered after dark never returned the same, or didn't return at all. But for Max, it was the perfect place to explore. He arrived just after sunset, backpack slung over his shoulder, flashlight in hand. The station's main building was boarded up, windows dark and coated in dust. The air smelled like iron and rot, a sharp tang that made his stomach twist. Max stepped onto the platform. The boards groaned under his weight. His flashlight illuminated graffiti, broken benches, and the faint outline of tracks disappearing into the shadows. Then he saw it. A train, sleek and black, unlike any modern engine, parked silently on the far track. Steam hissed from its wheels, but no smoke rose. Its windows were dark, reflecting nothing. A bell tolled, soft, distant, echoing across the station. His skin prickled. He shouldn't have been here, but curiosity, stupid, stubborn curiosity, pushed him forward. The train door opened with a hiss. A warm, unnatural air spilled out, smelling faintly of burnt sugar and metal. Max hesitated. The tracks behind him stretched into empty night. Once he stepped in, there would be no turning back. He stepped in. Inside, the train was empty. Rows of seats, old-fashioned, upholstered in crimson velvet, lined both sides. The lighting was dim, flickering, yet the carriage was spotless. The air was thick, almost alive. Max walked down the aisle, calling out, "Hello?" No answer. He reached the end of the carriage and saw a figure, a conductor, pale and tall, wearing an old uniform that smelled faintly of iron and mildew. The conductor's eyes were black, empty, yet they burned with something intelligent, something hungry. "Ticket," the voice said, low, scraping. I don't have one," Max stammered. The conductor smiled, a slow, wide smile that revealed no teeth. "It's not needed," he said. "Not tonight." The lights flickered, and the carriage walls seemed to stretch, elongating into darkness. Max tried to back away, but the floor shifted beneath him, tilting. The seats seemed to reach for him, their arms bending like hands. Shadows twisted along the ceiling. The train lurched forward. Outside the windows, the world was gone. No stars, no moon, only darkness. Shapes appeared in the void, blurred, humanoid, clawing at the glass as if trying to get in. Whispers filled the air, not coming from anyone on the train, but from somewhere deeper, beyond comprehension. Max ran back down the aisle, trying to find a door, but the train was endless, the carriages repeating, stretching infinitely. Each door led to another carriage, identical, but in each, the shadows were closer, darker, and the whispers grew louder, forming words he could almost understand. You shouldn't have come. Stay with us. Forever. Panic overtook him. He screamed, pounding on doors, pulling at windows. The conductor appeared behind him, calm and silent, eyes like holes into another world. He reached out, and the train lurched violently. Max fell forward. When he looked up, he wasn't in the carriage anymore. He was standing on a platform. The station looked abandoned, quiet, safe. A train whistle sounded in the distance, faint, almost cheerful. Max ran to the street, never looking back. Days later, he tried to explain what happened to anyone who would listen, but when he returned to the station, the train was gone. The tracks led only to empty night. And sometimes, late at night, Max swore he could hear the soft hiss of a train approaching, doors opening, calling his name. The old mirror in the antique shop was unlike anything Sam had ever seen. Its frame was carved with twisting faces, mouths open in silent screams. The glass itself was oddly dark, reflecting not the room, but something deeper, a shadow that seemed to move independently. Sam bought it impulsively, ignoring the shopkeeper's warning. Don't look too long. Some reflections stay. At first, nothing happened. The mirror leaned against his bedroom wall, collecting dust. But after a week, he began noticing subtle differences. The reflection moved slightly behind him when he stayed still. Once he raised his hand to scratch his face, and the reflection smiled when he didn't. He laughed it off. I'm imagining things, he muttered. But then came the whispers. Late at night, when the apartment was quiet, he heard faint voices from the mirror, low and sibilant, saying things he couldn't understand. The voices grew louder, forming words over days. Come, stay, join us. Sam tried covering the mirror, turning it to face the wall, but he could still hear the whispers through the glass. He slept poorly, haunted by glimpses of movement in the reflection. Figures appeared behind him, pale and faceless, always just out of reach. One night, exhausted, he stared into the mirror, trying to confront it. The reflection was still. Then it blinked, though he hadn't. Its eyes were hollow, black pools, and it grinned, revealing a mouth that stretched impossibly wide. Before he could look away, the reflection's hand reached out, pressing against the glass. Sam's heart raced. He saw his own hand mimicking the motion, yet it wasn't his hand. It was thinner, paler, clawed at the edges. The next morning, Sam woke to find the apartment empty. His furniture was gone, his belongings vanished. Only the mirror remained, standing in the center of the floor. And inside it, a figure stared back. Not him, but a version of himself, pale and twisted, smiling in the way he never had. Sam's screams echoed from somewhere inside the mirror. He could feel his own body, trapped, watching as the reflection moved freely in the world he had left behind. People passing by the apartment sometimes hear muffled cries from inside, but the door never opens, and every mirror Sam ever owned afterwards seemed to wink at him, just slightly, as if impatient. The town had been abandoned for years. Not officially. Official records still listed it, but anyone with sense avoided it. Buildings sagged, streets cracked, and the air hung heavy with silence. But Michael drove there, chasing a dare from his friends, spend the night in the old hospital on the hill. The hospital loomed as he approached, dark windows like watching eyes, its paint peeled in long strips, doors hung crooked on rusty hinges. He parked his car, flashlight in hand, and stepped onto the cracked pavement. Inside, the smell hit him first, antiseptic long gone, mixed with mold and decay. The corridors were empty, yet he felt watched. Every footstep echoed unnaturally, bouncing off walls as if the building itself were alive. He explored room after room, broken beds, rusted equipment, charts with names long erased. Then he found the operating theater. The doors were wide open. Inside, tables lay overturned, and the walls were streaked with dried, dark stains. On one table was a tray of surgical tools, gleaming as if polished, though coated in dust.
The city of Korath had always been strange, even before it was abandoned. Streets shifted overnight. Buildings appeared where none had been the day before, and fog rolled in with a presence almost conscious, curling around corners and doorways. Scholars called it an anomalous city, but locals called it cursed. Few dared enter. Fewer returned. Jonas was not a local. He was a linguist, obsessed with strange languages, symbols, and texts that defied comprehension. When he discovered a set of manuscripts describing Korath and its impossible architecture, he knew he had to see it for himself. He arrived at dusk, the sky bruised purple. The city seemed dead. Buildings leaned at impossible angles, streets folded into themselves. The air was heavy, tasting faintly metallic. Jonas felt a shiver, though he had worn a coat thick enough for winter. Something about the fog was alive, pulsing. As he walked, he noticed symbols etched into walls, doors, and pavements, shapes that seemed to shift when he looked away. Lines curved in ways that defied geometry, patterns moving almost imperceptibly. He drew them in his notebook, but the symbols seemed to rewrite themselves on the page, changing subtly. By midnight, the city had changed entirely. Streets he had walked before were gone, replaced by endless alleys folding into themselves. Buildings rose impossibly tall, then collapsed into nothingness when he tried to approach. Shadows moved independently of any light source. Something followed him, something patient, unseen, intelligent. The whispers started, not human, not language, a resonance in his skull, vibrating, urging him to see, to read, to understand. Jonas tried to resist. He walked blindly, stumbling over broken stones. Shapes emerged from the fog, tall, thin, multi-limbed figures, their bodies bending in ways human anatomy forbade. They did not move like walking, but like thought. Jonas entered a cathedral-like building, enormous, walls stretching far beyond the ceiling he could see. Within, countless eyes floated in the darkness, blinking slowly. A voice, or thought, entered his mind. "You see too much. You belong."
He tried to leave, but the city no longer had edges. Streets spiraled into themselves. Doors opened into hallways with no end. The fog pressed closer, cold, tactile, carrying whispers of names, numbers, and shapes, all forming visions he could not process. He began to feel his body stretching, his limbs elongating, skin tingling as if alive. Jonas's reflection in a cracked mirror smiled at him independently. The manuscripts had warned him. Knowledge of Korath was dangerous. Understanding its geometry, its symbols, its rhythm of space and time made one unstable. Human flesh, mind, and consciousness became pliable, folded into the city's will. Jonas screamed. His voice multiplied, echoing infinitely. The figures approached, touching him with cold, thought-like fingers. Each contact brought visions, cities folding, stars bleeding into streets, universes compressed into a single room. His mind broke under the weight of seeing impossible realities, of understanding he should not understand. By dawn, the city seemed empty. Fog rolled over streets that now appeared ordinary, houses upright, streets flat. Yet the whispers lingered, soft, patient, waiting for the next intruder. Travelers passing through the outskirts sometimes report seeing figures watching through mist, a humanoid form, distorted beyond comprehension, moving in ways the eye cannot follow. Jonas exists now as part of Korath. His consciousness stretches across alleyways, through fog, embedded in walls and streets. He feels every new arrival, every curious soul drawn to the city. He whispers their names, guiding them inward, feeding them visions, bending them slowly into the shape of the city itself. And when the fog closes fully, the new ones join him, becoming patient watchers, stretching and observing, knowing and unknowing, forever part of Korath. The village of Ashmore had never been mapped properly. Nestled between mountains and dense forest, it seemed forgotten, a place the world outside had abandoned. Travelers spoke of strange lights and sounds at night, of shadows moving with intelligence, of people who arrived but were never seen again. Lydia had heard the stories, but dismissed them. She was a folklorist, and the legends of Ashmore fascinated her. She wanted to study them firsthand. One autumn morning, she packed her notebook, recorder, and camera and set off. The forest road to Ashmore twisted unnaturally. The trees grew closer together, blocking the sun, and shadows stretched in impossible directions. The deeper she went, the more the path seemed to lengthen, as if the forest itself were reshaping. Birds were silent. The air was unnaturally cold, heavy with the scent of decay. By dusk, Lydia reached the village. Houses were intact, but strangely uniform, all gray and aging, their windows dark. Not a single villager was in sight. The streets were silent, paved with cobblestones worn smooth by centuries. A bell tower loomed in the center, its bell cracked and silent. She explored cautiously, noting odd details, doorways too narrow, windows that reflected scenes that didn't match the rooms inside, shadows that didn't align with their sources. In the central square, she saw a fountain. The water shimmered unnaturally, black in color, rippling through there was no wind. And in the water she saw faces, faces familiar to her but twisted, screaming silently. Lydia felt eyes on her. She turned. Figures emerged from the alleys, thin, pale, their limbs too long, fingers curled into hooks. Their faces were indistinct, like wax melting into human form. They did not speak, but watched her, tilting their heads, their presence suffocating. She ran to the nearest house for shelter. Inside, the furniture was old but intact. A fireplace offered warmth, though the air remained cold. She lit a candle and recorded her observations, trying to rationalize the impossibility of it all. But as night fell, she heard whispers. At first, she thought it was the wind. Then she realized the whispers were inside her mind. Names, numbers, fragments of memory not her own. Voices promising knowledge, power, escape. She tried to leave, but the streets outside had changed. The alleys twisted impossibly, looping back on themselves. Every doorway led her back into the same room. Hours passed, or perhaps days. She lost track of time. Hunger and exhaustion became secondary to the creeping sense of being consumed. The whispers grew louder, shaping her thoughts. When she looked in mirrors or windows reflecting her image, the reflection was wrong. Her eyes black, her mouth wider than possible, her limbs subtly elongated. She realized with horror that the village was reshaping her. She was becoming one of them, part of the village, part of its shadowed intelligence. Lydia tried to scream, but her voice echoed oddly, like hundreds of voices layered over one another. Shadows moved in the corners of her vision, circling closer. One reached her. Cold, solid, impossible. She felt herself pulled into it, her body stretching, dissolving, remade. By morning, the village appeared as it always had, quiet, gray, empty of human life. Travelers who passed report seeing figures in the windows, but their forms were wrong. Shadows twisted unnaturally, and faces blinked behind glass. Sometimes, someone would hear their own voice echoing from the streets, calling their name in tones not their own. Lydia is inside the village now. She exists in every shadow, every whisper, every reflection, patient and watching. She waits for the next person curious enough to enter Ashmore, to see the faces in the fountain, to hear the voices in their mind. And when they do, she will greet them with a voice both familiar and alien as the village consumes them, reshaping them in turn.
The train arrived in the dead town at midnight. Not the schedule anyone remembered, and not the train anyone should have seen. Its cars were black, windows darkened as if absorbing light. The whistle was low, a sound that resonated not through the air, but inside the skull, vibrating the bones. Eleanor had been traveling for weeks, chasing abandoned tracks through forests and mountains, documenting old railway lines. When she saw the train, curiosity overrode caution. She stepped onto the platform. Inside, the train was impossibly clean. Rows of crimson velvet seats, polished metal rails, and faint golden light that seemed to hum with life. No conductor, no passengers. Yet the train moved, always moving, not just through space, but through something else. Time, memory, perception. Eleanor felt the air shift thickening around her, humming inside her chest. She explored carriage after carriage. Mirrors reflected not her own image, but faint glimpses of people she knew, her family, friends, strangers who had never existed. They blinked independently, their mouths moving, whispering words she almost understood. Then came the doors. Each one she opened led to a different reality, a different version of the train. One was dark, full of crawling shadows. One was flooded with light, but shapes floated in the glow, twisting impossibly. One led outside, but the world was wrong. Sky a deep red, trees bending unnaturally, the ground pulsing like skin. The whispers grew, not outside, not from passengers, but inside her head. Thoughts she had never had, memories that weren't hers, and numbers,
codes, sequences, impossible mathematics. Do not leave. Do not look. Join us. A figure appeared, tall, thin, faceless, in a conductor's uniform that smelled faintly of iron and decay. It gestured to her. Eleanor wanted to run, but her feet wouldn't obey. The train seemed to bend her body, stretch it, reshape her perception. She felt herself folding in on herself, consciousness expanding beyond her skull, slipping into the walls, into the seats, into the mirrors. She realized with horror that the train wasn't just a train. It was a vessel for minds, a collector. The previous passengers weren't gone. They had become part of it. Now she felt the others, countless, patient, silent, their awareness threading through her own. Doors opened in impossible ways, leading to carriages that shouldn't exist, filled with impossible geometries. Seats curved into themselves, ceilings melted into floors, and the shadows moved with intelligence, shaping the environment to trap and observe. She screamed, but sound had no meaning here. The train pulsed with life, its walls breathing, its windows showing infinity. The figure approached, placing a cold hand on her shoulder. She felt herself pulled apart and recombined. Consciousness stretched across time, space, and impossible dimensions. By the time the train reached the end of the line, it stopped in a place that was nowhere and everywhere. The station was empty. The world outside seemed ordinary, yet anyone who passed reported seeing a figure in crimson velvet, seated, staring out the window with eyes that reflected infinity. Eleanor no longer exists as she once did. Her mind is scattered across the train among countless others. She whispers to the next curious traveler, guiding them onto the platform, helping the train collect new passengers. The train never stops. It never waits. It is patient. And in every reflection, in every shadow along abandoned tracks, it watches, waiting for the next soul to follow the whistle. The research facility had been sealed for years. Scientists had vanished, documents were shredded, and rumors whispered of experiments that transcended human understanding. But Adrian had spent months tracking its location, following breadcrumbs of rumors, old maps, and fragmented journals. He was determined to document it, to uncover the truth. The gates were rusted, the fence broken in places, yet a sense of expectation hung in the air, as if the facility itself had been waiting for him. Inside, the corridors were silent, lights long dead, and the air thick with chemical tang and decay. Floor tiles were cracked, walls scrawled with warnings. Do not proceed. Do not look. They are patient. He pressed forward. The deeper he went, the more the facility seemed alive. Hallways stretched longer than possible, doors opened into rooms that weren't there before, and shadows moved independent of any light source. He found journals, scribbled with calculations and descriptions of experiments that combined biology, physics, and something else, something alien. The first experiment room was intact, tables lined with instruments, and in the center, a containment chamber. Inside, a form writhed, not fully human, not fully machine, tentacles of flesh and metal intertwined, eyes forming and reforming along its body. Adrian froze, notebook shaking. He could see consciousness in the creature, fragmented and screaming silently. Then he heard whispers, not through his ears, but inside his mind, coiling around thoughts, inserting images he could not unsee, creatures folding in on themselves, laboratories looping into infinity, human forms stretched beyond recognition. As he advanced, he began to feel his own body betraying him. Fingers tingled, elongating, skin stretching unnaturally. He tried to move, but his limbs felt heavier, more pliable. The facility responded, shifting in tandem with his movements, corridors twisting, walls bending,
spaces folding like origami. In the next room, rows of human-like figures hung suspended, veins and nerves exposed, connected to machinery that pulsed with light. Each body moved slightly, as though aware, eyes opening and closing in unison. Adrian realized with horror that the facility did not just observe life, it reconstituted it. He felt a tug in his mind, an invitation to join. Panic set in. He ran, corridors elongating endlessly, the facility reshaping itself around him. Doors led back to the same room, the same figures. Shadows reached for him, fingers of darkness wrapping around his limbs, whispering in a language that made his skull ache. He stumbled into the main lab. There, a device hummed, a vast machine of metal, glass, and flesh. At its core, a swirling mass of consciousness, countless minds fused into one. He saw glimpses of himself in it, fragmented, stretched, already becoming part of it. The whispers grew to screams, thoughts being forced into his mind. His reflection in the metallic walls moved independently, grinning, whispering secrets of the universe, impossible geometries, forbidden knowledge. Reality bent around him, time fractured. He could feel himself folding, dissolving, stretching beyond the bounds of human understanding. By dawn, the facility appeared abandoned, documents scattered, instruments still intact, doors locked as if no one had entered in years. Yet inside, somewhere, Adrian exists now. Not in one body, not in one mind, but everywhere. He whispers in the dark corridors, waits in shadows, shaping the next intruder. Visitors report hearing movement in the empty halls, low breathing, faint whispers repeating their own thoughts back to them. Some vanish without trace. Others return changed, eyes vacant, movements stiff, muttering about corridors that never end and voices that speak inside their heads. And the facility waits, patient, alive, always hungry for the next mind, the next body, the next soul to fold into its impossible architecture. The mansion on Black Hollow Road had been empty for as long as anyone could remember. Locals avoided it, telling tales of screams that pierced the night, of lights that moved through shattered windows, and of shadows that didn't belong to anyone. But Michael, an urban explorer and photographer, didn't care about warnings. He arrived just before sunset. The mansion was massive, Victorian, leaning at impossible angles, its walls cracked and peeling. The gates were ajar, creaking as he pushed through, and the air smelled of damp wood, rot, and something else, something metallic, sharp. Inside the mansion was silent. Floorboards groaned under his weight. Dust covered everything, yet the room seemed lived in. Chairs slightly moved, objects slightly rearranged as though someone had just stepped away. Michael raised his camera, capturing shots that seemed off. In every photo,
there was a house at the edge of Maplewood Lane that no one dared approach. Its windows were dark, and the wooden panels groaned whenever the wind blew. Children told stories of shadows moving inside, but it was the attic mirror that frightened everyone most. Emma inherited the house unexpectedly from her great-aunt, a woman she had never met. She arrived in early October, leaves crisp underfoot, fog rolling through the street. The house smelled of dust, mildew, and something faintly metallic. Despite the warnings from locals, Emma entered, driven by curiosity and the faint promise of a new start. The first night she explored the lower floors. Cobwebs clung to corners, furniture was coated in dust, and every floorboard groaned under her weight. In the kitchen, cupboards hung open, their contents decayed, jars filled with unknown substances. Emma felt eyes on her, though no one was there. That night, the whispers began, soft, like wind through trees, calling her name. She thought it was her imagination until she saw her reflection in the hallway mirror. At first, it was normal, her own pale face staring back. Then it moved independently, grinning while she did not. Emma froze. Her reflection's eyes glimmered black, and its lips whispered, "Join me." Fear rooted her to the spot. She backed away, but the hallway stretched impossibly. Doors that had been behind her now appeared ahead. Mirrors multiplied, each showing versions of her that were thinner, taller, and smiling grotesquely. She ran upstairs to the attic, where the original mirror was said to reside. The stairs groaned, warped unnaturally under her weight. When she opened the attic door, the mirror stood tall, edges ornate, dark. Its surface rippled like water. Emma stepped closer. Her reflection did not. It raised a hand, beckoning. Emma's heart pounded. She wanted to flee, but the attic seemed endless. The reflection whispered again, "Step in. Live forever." Against all reason, Emma touched the glass. It was cold, liquid beneath her fingertips, pulling her in. The attic vanished. Darkness enveloped her. She screamed, but no sound escaped. When she opened her eyes, she stood inside the mirror, a room that reflected everything, yet nothing she knew. Outside, her body remained motionless. Through the glass, a new figure appeared, a visitor peering into the mirror, curious, unsuspecting. Emma's reflection smiled, patient, hungry. The house remained silent, the attic mirror waiting, as it had for decades. The observatory on Raven Peak had been abandoned since the astronomer vanished 50 years ago. Scholars whispered about strange celestial readings and experiments that looked too far into the sky. Isaac, a young astrophysicist, didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in data, patterns, and the logic of the universe. He arrived at night, the road winding and fog-choked. The observatory loomed against the stars, a massive dome cracked and worn. Inside, dust coated every surface, and the telescope sat pointing at a section of sky that seemed wrong. The stars there flickered unnaturally, as if blinking. Isaac began to record data, adjusting the telescope, taking careful notes. But as the night deepened, the air grew heavier, the room darker. Shadows moved where no light should fall, and faint whispers hummed behind the walls, indecipherable yet insistent. He looked through the telescope, and the stars twisted. Constellations formed impossible geometries, angles that should not exist. Shapes emerged in the lens, human but wrong. Eyes where mouths should be, limbs bending in unnatural ways, faces melting into stars. They stared at him. The whispers became voices in his mind, speaking sequences of numbers and words and languages he couldn't know. The telescope itself pulsed, a heartbeat he could feel through the floor. The longer he watched, the more he felt his mind bending, stretching, aligning with the cosmic rhythm he could not comprehend. Hours, or maybe centuries passed. Isaac's body became unsteady, limbs elongating subtly, muscles twitching, consciousness fracturing. The observatory was alive, patient, reshaping him, folding him into the universe it had glimpsed. When dawn broke, travelers found the observatory empty. The telescope remained, pointing skyward. On the lens, faint reflections moved. A man, or what had been a man, watching, waiting for anyone else curious enough to look too closely. The village of Evershade did not appear on any modern map. Fog clung to the streets, alleys bent impossibly, and the buildings seemed older than time itself. Caroline, a historian, sought it out to study abandoned settlements,
dismissing the warnings of local villagers. She arrived at dusk. The streets were empty, yet every window seemed to stare at her. Doors opened into hallways that twisted back on themselves. The fog carried whispers, faint and patient, beckoning her deeper. The longer she wandered, the more she felt herself changing. Fingers stretched, joints ached in impossible ways, skin tingling like it had a life of its own. The villagers, or what remained of them, appeared in shadows, pale, thin, faceless, moving fluidly, guiding her further into the maze of streets. In the central square stood a fountain. Its water was black, reflecting not the town, but voids filled with countless faces screaming silently. Forms emerged from the fountain, surrounding Caroline. Whispers filled her mind, telling her truths she could not process. She tried to leave, but the village resisted. Streets looped, windows reflected horrors, shadows followed her every step, time fractured. Her mind split. Every thought became part of the town's infinite consciousness. Caroline screamed, but her voice was absorbed into the fog. By morning, Evershade appeared abandoned, silent, yet patient. Travelers passing through sometimes glimpse figures in windows. Caroline exists now in every shadow, every whisper, waiting for the next curious soul. The train arrived at midnight, though no timetable listed it. Its cars were black, windows absorbing light, whistle low and resonant inside bones. Ethan, an urban explorer, stepped aboard. Inside, the train was immaculate. Crimson velvet seats, polished rails, lights humming with life. No conductor, no passengers, yet it moved, endlessly. Not through geography, but through time, space, perception. Ethan explored. Mirrors reflected impossible versions of himself. Hallways led into rooms that didn't exist. Outside the windows, landscapes twisted, mountains folding into seas, cities melting into void. Whispers entered his mind. Stay, join us, forever. Figures emerged, tall, thin, multi-limbed, faceless, moving like thought. They touched him. His limbs tingled, stretching, mind fracturing, body bending. Doors looped endlessly. The train collected him, folding his consciousness into its infinite structure. By dawn, the train was gone. Tracks led nowhere. Observers sometimes glimpse its black silhouette at night, hear a low whistle, see figures in crimson velvet staring from windows. Ethan exists now within, patient, waiting for the next traveler. The lighthouse of Blackwater Cliffs had long been abandoned. Green light sometimes swept across the rocks, even though the lamp was cold. No keeper had survived more than a month inside. Lydia, a marine historian, arrived at dusk, fog thickening along the cliff path. The lighthouse loomed. Inside, spiral stairs twisted endlessly. The walls were lined with logs, charts, warnings. Do not proceed. They are patient. Ascending, the whispers began. Inside her mind, names, numbers, commands, memories that weren't hers. Shadows moved independently, corners stretching. At the lamp room, the glass pulsed, green light spilling into impossible spaces. Forms emerged from the light, tall, thin, multi-limbed, faceless. Lydia's body betrayed her, fingers elongated, muscles twisted, consciousness splintering. The lighthouse was alive, reshaping her, folding her mind into its infinite structure. Time fractured. She existed in walls, shadows, stairs, the fog outside.